The first time I truly understood fear, I was standing next to a human. My name is Zethik, and I serve as a junior communications officer aboard the Galactic Defense Coalition vessel times Harmony's Edge **. My species, the Vorthak, are known throughout the galaxy for our logical minds and steady nerves. We process danger through careful calculation, not emotion. Fear, as humans experience it, was something I had only read about in xenobiology reports. That changed during what the humans now call the Battle of Kepler Station. I had been assigned to the bridge communications array when the distress signal came through. The transmission was broken, filled with static. But the coordinates were clear. Kepler Station, a mining outpost on the edge of Terran space, was under attack by Zerathi raiders. The Zerathi are nightmare creatures, even by galactic standards. 8-foot-tall insectoids with razor-sharp claws and acid that can melt through standard armor in seconds. They hunt in swarms, overwhelming their prey through sheer numbers and savage brutality. Most species in the Coalition avoid direct confrontation with them whenever possible. Captain Morrison, the human commander of our ship, didn't hesitate. "Set course for Kepler Station. Maximum speed," she ordered, her voice calm and steady. I watched the navigation display as our destination appeared on screen. We were 3 hours away at best speed. According to standard Zerathi attack patterns, the station would be completely overrun in 2. "Captain," I said, my voice carrying the logical tone my people are known for. "Tactical analysis suggests the station will be compromised before our arrival. Perhaps we should contact the nearest Coalition fleet instead." Captain Morrison turned to look at me, and I saw something in her eyes that I couldn't immediately identify. Later, I would understand it was determination mixed with something else, something that made humans different from every other species I had encountered. "Officer Zethik," she said, "there are 1,200 civilians on that station. Miners, their families, children. I don't care what the tactical analysis says. We're going to try." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the engines pushing us toward what every calculation said would be our destruction. Our ship carried a crew of 43 beings from 7 different species. We had light weapons, basic shields, and a hull designed for patrol duties, not combat with the most feared raiders in the galaxy. As we approached Kepler Station, the scope of the disaster became clear. The station's outer ring was already dark, atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches. Zerathi attack ships swarmed around the structure like metal wasps, their weapons flashing as they tore into the remaining defensive positions. "Incoming transmission from the station," I reported, my fingers working across the communication console with practiced efficiency. The voice that came through was human, male, strained with exhaustion and pain. "This is Station Commander Hayes. If anyone's out there, we can't hold much longer. They've broken through sectors 7 and 9. We're falling back to the core, but we've got civilians trapped in the residential areas. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need immediate assistance." Captain Morrison's jaw tightened. She looked around the bridge at her crew, taking in each face. There was Chief Engineer Gralex, a Thurian whose species values honor above survival. Lieutenant Torres, a human tactical officer with steady hands. Pilot Krex, whose forearms made him the finest navigator in 3 sectors. And me, trying to process what was about to happen through pure logic. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going into combat, against overwhelming odds to save lives. Everyone aboard this ship volunteered to serve in the Coalition because they believe some things are worth fighting for. Today, we find out if we meant it." I felt something strange in my chest cavity as she spoke, a tightness that my medical training couldn't explain. My heart rate increased, and my breathing became shallow. These were symptoms I recognized from human stress responses, but I had never experienced them myself. "Captain," Lieutenant Torres called out from the tactical station, "I'm reading 37 Zerathi raiders around the station. They've detected us and are moving to intercept." "Good," Morrison replied, and the strange expression in her eyes intensified. "That means they're not focused on the civilians. Zethik, Open a channel to all coalition frequencies. Let them know we're engaging. As I worked to establish the communication link, I became aware of the humans on the bridge behaving in ways that defied logical explanation. Their stress indicators were elevated, yes, but instead of seeking to minimize risk, they seemed to be embracing it. Captain Morrison was actually smiling as she watched the Zarathi ships approach. This is Coalition Vessel, times Harmony's Edge, asterisk. I transmitted on all emergency frequencies. We are engaging Zarathi forces at Kepler Station. Request immediate backup from any available Coalition ships. The reply came quickly, but not from Coalition Command. It was from the captain of a Valorian merchant vessel, 3 systems away, asterisk Harmony's Edge, asterisk, this is Captain Veltar of the Times Golden Current, asterisk. Are you insane? You're 1 ship against an entire Zarathi raiding party. Withdraw immediately and wait for proper support. Before I could respond, Captain Morrison reached over and activated the transmitter herself. Captain Veltar. This is Captain Morrison. We have 1,200 civilians counting on us. If you want to wait for proper support, that's your choice. We're going in. The first Zarathi interceptor reached weapons range as she finished speaking. The alien ship was a sleek, predatory thing. All sharp angles and weapon ports. It opened fire immediately. Green energy bolts streaking across space toward our hull. Lieutenant Torres returned fire with our modest defensive array, but the difference in firepower was obvious. We had patrol ship weapons facing down military raiders designed for maximum destruction. Shields at 60%, Torres reported as another enemy salvo found its mark. At this rate, we won't last 5 minutes. That was when I felt it for the first time. True fear. Not the calculated awareness of danger that my species experiences, but something deeper and more primal. The knowledge that I was about to die, and there was nothing logical or reasonable about our situation. My hands began to shake as I tried to maintain communication with the station. This made no sense. We should retreat, regroup, contact proper authorities, and approach this through established protocols. Everything about our current course of action violated basic survival instincts. But as I looked around the bridge, I saw something that challenged everything I thought I knew about intelligent behavior. The humans weren't just accepting this fear. They were using it. Captain Morrison's movements became sharper, more decisive. Lieutenant Torres's targeting became more precise under pressure. They were actually performing better as the situation became more desperate. Zethik, Captain Morrison called out. I need you to patch me through to the station's internal communication system. Can you do that? Yes, Captain, but why would you? I began. Just do it, please. I established the link, my trembling fingers somehow finding the right controls. Morrison's voice echoed through the corridors of the dying station. This is Captain Morrison of the Coalition ship times Harmony's Edge asterisk. I know things look bad right now, but I need everyone to listen carefully. We're here, and we're not leaving without you. I need all civilians to move to the central core immediately. Security personnel, we're going to buy you time to get everyone to safety. The response came from multiple locations throughout the station. Human voices, mostly, but others as well. Families with children, elderly miners who had spent their lives pulling resources from dead rocks, young people who had never seen combat. Captain, this is Commander Hayes again. I've got 62 security personnel left, and we're almost out of ammunition. We can't hold them much longer. Morrison looked at her tactical display, where the red dots representing Zarathi ships vastly outnumbered the single green dot of our vessel. Commander, you just need to hold for 20 more minutes. Help is on the way. I stared at her in confusion. No help was on the way. The nearest coalition fleet was 6 hours out, and we had already transmitted our desperate situation to every ship in range. What was she talking about? Torres suddenly looked up from his console, understanding dawning on his face. Captain, are you planning what I think you're planning? Morrison nodded grimly. We can't fight 37 ships, but we don't have to. We just need to make them think twice about easy prey. She turned to address the entire bridge crew. Everyone, listen carefully. We're about to do something that goes against every tactical manual ever written. We're going to charge directly into the middle of their formation. The alien members of the crew, myself included, stared at her in shock. Chief Engineer Gralix's tentacles writhed in distress. Pilot Krex's four hands froze over his controls. "Captain," I managed to say, "that's suicide. Our shields can't withstand focused fire from that many ships." "You're absolutely right, Zethic. It is suicide if we try to fight them ship to ship. But the Zerathi have a weakness that most species don't know about. They're pack hunters. They rely on overwhelming smaller prey through coordinated attacks. When something charges directly at them instead of running away, it confuses their attack patterns." Lieutenant Torres was nodding now, his human brain apparently following some logic that eluded the rest of us. "The bigger their swarm, the more they get in each other's way when their prey doesn't behave predictably." "Exactly," Morrison confirmed. "We're going to punch through their formation, target their command ship, and make them think we're either insane or carrying weapons powerful enough to make a suicide run worthwhile." I felt that strange tightness in my chest growing stronger. "But Captain, if you're wrong about their reaction, then we die trying to save 1,200 people instead of dying while running away from them," she interrupted. "Pilot Krex, I need you to plot a course directly through the center of their formation. Maximum speed. Straight. At their biggest ship." Krex's voice was barely a whisper. "This goes against every survival instinct my people have evolved over 10,000 years. Captain Morrison's expression softened slightly. "I know. I'm not ordering anyone to do this. If you want to set us down somewhere safe and wait for proper backup, I'll understand. But those people on the station don't have the luxury of waiting for proper backup." The bridge fell silent except for the sound of weapons fire getting closer as more Zerathi ships joined the attack. Our shields were down to 40%, and our weapon systems were already overheating from continuous fire. That's when I realized something that changed my understanding of courage forever. Fear wasn't the opposite of bravery. Fear was the foundation of it. Every human on that bridge was terrified, but they were choosing to act despite that terror, not because they lacked it. I looked at my trembling hands and made a decision that surprised even me. "Captain Morrison," I said, working to keep my voice steady. "Communications are ready. When you need me to coordinate with the station, I'll be here." Chief Engineer Gralix's tentacles stopped writhing. "Engineering will give you everything the engines have, Captain." Pilot Krex's four hands moved to his controls. "Course plotted, ready on your command." Morrison looked around the bridge one more time, taking in each face. "All right then. For the coalition, for the civilians who can't fight back, and for the idea that sometimes doing the right thing matters more than doing the safe thing." She paused, then added with a slight smile. "Besides, if we pull this off, we'll have the best story to tell at the next coalition gathering." Lieutenant Torres actually laughed at that, the sound somehow making the fear more bearable instead of less real. "Engage," Morrison ordered. The Times Harmony's edge times leaped forward, accelerating directly toward the largest concentration of Zerathi ships in the galaxy. As we closed the distance, I finally understood what humans meant when they talked about standing together in the face of impossible odds. I was still terrified. But for the first time in my life, I was terrified alongside beings who considered that terror a price worth paying for doing what was right. The real battle was about to begin. The Zerathi formation scattered like startled insects as we plunged into their midst. I watched in amazement as ships that had been maintaining perfect attack patterns suddenly broke formation, their pilots apparently unable to process the sight of a lone coalition vessel charging directly toward their largest battleship. Captain Morrison had been right about their psychology, but seeing it happen was something else entirely. "Shields holding at 32%, Lieutenant Torres reported, his voice tight with concentration. "They're not focusing their fire. I think we confused them." The Zerathi command ship loomed ahead of us, a massive black wedge bristling with weapon ports. Unlike the smaller raiders, this ship wasn't moving away from our approach. If anything, it seemed to be turning to meet us head-on. "Captain," I said, monitoring the communication channels, "I'm picking up Zerathi battle language. They're calling us either mad prey or death-seeking." Their translators aren't quite clear on the distinction. Oh, Morrison's smile grew wider. Perfect. Krex. Bring us within 500 meters of their command ship. Then break off at the last second. I want them to think we're carrying fusion charges. 500 meters? Krex's voice cracked slightly. Captain, at that range, if they fire their main weapons, they won't, Morrison interrupted. They can't risk destroying whatever super weapon they think we're carrying. Not until they're sure what it is. As we closed the final distance, I found myself gripping my console so hard that my knuckles turned pale. The Zerathi command ship filled our entire view screen, its hull plating scarred from countless battles. Weapon ports tracked our movement, but as Morrison had predicted, they held their fire. At the last possible second, Krex yanked us into a spiraling turn that brought us around the command ship's superstructure. Emergency alarms blared as our hull scraped against their shield generators, sparks flying across both ships. Now, Morrison shouted. Torres, hit their shield generators with everything we have. Our modest weapons array concentrated fire on the points where we had just made contact. The Zerathi shields, designed to repel attacks from a distance, couldn't adapt quickly enough to defend against weapons fire from within their own defensive perimeter. Explosions bloomed along the command ship's hull as 3 shield generator nodes overloaded and died. Atmosphere vented from damaged sections. And for a moment, the massive raider seemed to drift helplessly. All Zerathi ships, this is Coalition Vessel times Harmony's Edge *, I transmitted on their military frequencies, following Morrison's quickly whispered instructions. Your command ship is crippled. Withdraw immediately, or we will demonstrate our full capabilities. The response was immediate and exactly what Morrison had hoped for: confusion. The smaller Zerathi ships had lost their formation entirely, circling at a distance while their commanders tried to understand what had just happened. Their pack hunter instincts were completely disrupted by prey that not only fought back but had somehow wounded their alpha. Station Commander Hayes, Morrison called over the communication link. This is your window. Get those civilians to the evacuation points now. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they figure out we're bluffing. Understood. Harmony's Edge *. Moving all civilians to Central Core. How did you just do that to their command ship? Trade secret, Morrison replied with a grin. Just get your people to safety. I monitored the communication channels as chaos erupted among the Zerathi fleet. Their rapid, clicking language was being transmitted on multiple frequencies as ship commanders demanded orders from their crippled flagship. The beautiful thing about pack hunters, I was beginning to understand, was that they struggled to function when their hierarchy was disrupted. But our advantage wouldn't last long. Captain, Torres announced grimly, the Zerathi are regrouping. I count 23 ships, moving into attack formation around us. And their command ship is bringing auxiliary power to weapons. Morrison studied the tactical display, her mind clearly working through possibilities at incredible speed. How long until the station evacuation is complete? I checked with Commander Hayes. 15 minutes minimum. They have civilians scattered across 3 different sections. We don't have 15 minutes, Krex observed, his 4 hands dancing over the pilot controls as he tried to keep us moving unpredictably through the growing web of enemy ships. That's when Morrison did something that demonstrated exactly why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most unpredictable warriors. Instead of trying to escape or find a defensive position, she ordered us to attack. Torres, target the 2 smallest raiders on our port side. Full power to weapons. Captain, if we open fire, they'll know we don't have super weapons, I protested. Maybe, she agreed, but they'll also know we're serious about fighting. Zerathi respect strength, and sometimes making them think you're willing to die fighting is the same as actually being strong. Our weapons blazed out across space, striking the 2 smaller raiders with concentrated fire. The ships weren't destroyed, but their shields flared, and their hulls took visible damage. More importantly, they immediately returned fire. And suddenly the space around us was filled with energy weapons and explosive projectiles. Shields at 18%, Torres called out as we took hits from multiple directions. We can't take much more of this. But something unexpected was happening. Instead of coordinating their attacks to overwhelm us quickly, The Zerathi ships were competing with each other to land killing blows. Their pack hunter mentality was working against them in a different way now. Each ship commander wanted to be the one to bring down the mysterious enemy that had wounded their leader. The result was scattered, uncoordinated fire that we could actually survive for precious minutes longer than we should have. Morrison was constantly talking now, coordinating our movements with information I was relaying from the station. Krex, bring us around to heading 270. There's a cluster of escape pods launching from Section 12, and I want to make sure the Zerathi are looking at us instead of them. More escape pods launching from Section 8, I reported. Commander Hayes says they're down to the last group of civilians, but there are children who are scared to use the emergency transporters. I could see Morrison's jaw clench at the mention of children. Humans had an almost irrational protective instinct when it came to young beings, something that extended across species lines. It was simultaneously their greatest weakness and their greatest strength. How long? She asked. 8 minutes for the children's group. They need time to calm them down and get them to the evacuation points. Morrison looked at the tactical display again. Our shields were failing, our weapons were overheating, and we were completely surrounded by enemies who were beginning to realize that we weren't carrying planet-killer weapons. Torres, she said quietly, prepare to launch our entire stock of emergency flares. Lieutenant Torres looked confused. Captain, emergency flares are just signal devices. They won't do any damage they're not meant to do damage. They're meant to look impressive. Launch them in a spread pattern around their command ship. Make it look like we're deploying some kind of specialized weapon. Take. Crom. I understood immediately. Another bluff, buying more time through misdirection, and the Zerathi tendency to be cautious around unknown threats. The flares streaked out across space, brilliant points of light that painted the darkness in stark colors. To sensors unfamiliar with Coalition emergency equipment, they could easily be mistaken for some kind of exotic weapon system activating. The Zerathi response was immediate. All ships pulled back to a safer distance. Weapons trained on our position but holding fire while their commanders tried to analyze the new threat. Brilliant, I whispered, and realized that I was beginning to think like a human. When faced with impossible odds, instead of accepting defeat, we had found ways to make the impossible slightly more possible, 1 minute at a time. But our luck was running out. The Zerathi command ship was finally responding to our attack, bringing its massive weapons online despite the damage we had inflicted. When those weapons fired, our small patrol ship would be vaporized instantly. Captain, Torres announced, his voice heavy with resignation. The command ship is targeting us with its main array. Impact in 30 seconds. Morrison nodded calmly. Zethik, get me Commander Hayes one more time. Commander Hayes here, came the voice from the station, still strained but somehow more hopeful than before. Commander, what's the status on those children? Loading them into the last evacuation transport now, Captain. 3 more minutes, maybe 4. Morrison looked around the bridge at her crew. In 30 seconds, we would all be dead, and the evacuation would still be incomplete. The logical thing to do would be to try to escape, to save the ship and crew we could save. Instead, Morrison made a choice that I will remember for the rest of my life. Krex, I need you to put us directly between that command ship and the station. Block their line of fire. I felt my heart stop beating. Captain, that will place us in the direct path of weapons designed to destroy capital ships. We'll be annihilated. Yes, Morrison agreed simply. But their weapons will hit us instead of the station. That should give Commander Hayes the time he needs. Krex's hands trembled on the controls, but he began the maneuver without further protest. Chief Engineer Gralex's tentacles had gone completely still. And I realized that the Thurian was experiencing something that his honor-based culture recognized but mine did not. Humans called it sacrifice. The willing acceptance of death so that others might live. As we moved into position, I found myself thinking about fear again. I was more terrified than I had ever been in my life. But I was also experiencing something new. Pride. Not logical pride in a job well done, but something deeper. Pride in being part of something larger than myself. 10 seconds. Torres announced unnecessarily. We could all see the massive weapon array on the Zerathi command ship, glowing with contained energy. Morrison opened the ship-wide communication channel one last time. "All hands, this is the captain. It has been my honor to serve alongside you. Tell the galaxy that we held the line." The Zerathi weapon fired, a beam of destruction that could crack a moon. It struck our position exactly where Morrison had positioned us, directly between the raiders and the helpless civilians on the station. But something impossible happened in the moment before impact. The space around us filled with weapons, fire from an entirely different direction. Coalition ships, more than I could count, had arrived and opened fire on the Zerathi fleet. The energy beam meant for us was disrupted by an explosion that lit up half the system as the Zerathi command ship's weapons array overloaded under incoming fire. "All coalition vessels, this is Admiral Chen aboard the CNS Times Defiance **. Sorry we're late to the party, but we got here as fast as we could." I stared at the tactical display in shock. 37 coalition ships had just dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously, surrounding the Zerathi raiders who moments before had been preparing to finish us off. Morrison was laughing. Actually laughing. As weapons fire streaked past us in all directions. "Admiral Chen, this is Captain Morrison. Your timing is impeccable. We've been monitoring your communications for the last hour, Captain. When we heard you were engaging an entire raider fleet to protect civilians, every available ship in 3 sectors volunteered to assist. Couldn't let you have all the fun." As I listened to the coalition fleet coordinating their attack, I realized something profound about what had just happened. We hadn't been buying time for an evacuation. We had been buying time for help to arrive. But more than that, we had been proving that some fights were worth having, regardless of the odds. The Zerathi raiders, faced with a full coalition fleet, instead of one damaged patrol ship, broke formation and fled. Their pack hunter instincts finally worked in our favor, recognizing a superior predator and choosing retreat over destruction. Within minutes, the space around Kepler Station was clear of enemies. All 1,200 civilians were safely evacuated, and somehow, against every logical calculation, we had survived. As the immediate danger passed, I found myself looking at my human crewmates with new understanding. They had taught me something that no Vorthak educational institution had ever covered. Sometimes, the most logical thing to do was to act completely illogically in service of something larger than logic itself. Fear, I realized, wasn't something to be overcome through calculation. It was something to be acknowledged, accepted, and then used as fuel for choices that mattered. I was still learning what that meant, but I knew I would never be the same Vorthak who had started this day thinking he understood the universe. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler Station, I stood before the Galactic Defense Coalition Council to deliver my report. The chamber was filled with representatives from 47 different species, all waiting to hear the official account of what the media had started calling the impossible stand. But this wasn't the report they expected. "Honored counselors," I began, my voice carrying the formal tone my people were known for. "I have served as a communications officer for 6 years. And in that time, I believed I understood the fundamental principles of military tactics, risk assessment, and survival probability calculations." The Vorthak delegation nodded approvingly. They expected me to present a logical analysis of the tactical errors that had nearly resulted in the loss of a coalition vessel. Instead, I said, I was completely wrong about everything. The murmur that went through the chamber was immediate. Council Speaker Velnara, an ancient Centaurian with silver-tinted skin, leaned forward with interest. "Please continue, Officer Zethik." During the engagement at Kepler Station, Captain Morrison and her crew demonstrated principles that exist outside traditional tactical frameworks. They made decisions based not on probability of success, but on necessity of action. They taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act correctly despite fear. I paused, looking directly at the human delegation. Captain Morrison was there, along with the rest of the Times Harmony's Edge Times crew, waiting to receive commendations they insisted they didn't deserve. More importantly, they taught me something about what humans call holding the line. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the translation devices seemed to pause, as my words were processed into 46 different languages. Holding the line is not a tactical concept, I continued. It is a philosophical one. When humans say they will hold the line, they mean they will stand between innocent lives and danger, regardless of the cost to themselves. This is not a calculated risk. It is a moral absolute. I activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber, showing the tactical situation we had faced. One small ship against 37 raiders, with 1,200 civilian lives hanging in the balance. By every logical analysis, our mission should have failed. We were outgunned, outnumbered, and completely without backup. Any rational assessment would have concluded that retreat was the only viable option. The Vorthak delegation was nodding again, clearly expecting me to criticize the human decision-making process. But logic failed to account for something that humans understand instinctively. When you take a stand for something that matters, you change the fundamental nature of the equation. You stop being a target and become a symbol. You stop fighting for survival and start fighting for meaning. I changed the display to show the communication logs from the battle. Within 1 hour of our engagement, 37 coalition ships had volunteered to provide assistance. Crews abandoned shore leave, captains diverted from routine missions, and Admiral Chen organized the largest spontaneous fleet action in coalition history. Council Speaker Velnara spoke carefully. Are you suggesting that Captain Morrison knew help was coming? No, Counselor. I'm suggesting something far more significant. Captain Morrison made her decision to engage without any expectation of rescue. But when other ships heard that someone was willing to die protecting civilians, they couldn't stay away. Human courage is infectious. I turned to address the entire chamber. For the past 3 months, I have been analyzing the psychological and tactical implications of human behavior in extreme situations. My findings challenge fundamental assumptions about military strategy and species cooperation. The holographic display showed statistics I had compiled from dozens of coalition engagements. In battles where human crews are present, coalition forces demonstrate 23% higher morale, 18% better unit cohesion, and 41% greater willingness to accept dangerous assignments. These improvements extend across all species serving alongside humans. A Thurian counselor raised a tentacle. Officer Zethik, are you suggesting that human irrationality somehow improves military effectiveness? I had been hoping someone would ask that question. Counselor, with respect, I believe we have been misdefining rationality. If the purpose of military action is to protect innocent lives and preserve civilized values, then the most rational thing to do is whatever action best serves those goals, regardless of personal risk. I changed the display one more time, showing footage from Kepler Station during the evacuation. Families running toward escape pods, children clutching toys, elderly miners helping each other towards safety. 1,200 people are alive today because Captain Morrison chose to define rationality by outcome rather than probability. She held the line, not because victory was likely, but because defeat was unacceptable. The chamber was completely quiet now. Even the usual background hum of translation devices had stopped. During the battle, I experienced fear for the first time in my life. Real fear? Not the calculated awareness of danger that my species normally experiences. But I also experienced something else that my people had no word for until I learned the human concept. I looked directly at Captain Morrison, who was sitting with characteristic composure despite being the focus of galactic attention. Hope. The belief that doing the right thing matters, even when success is impossible to guarantee. Humans don't fight because they know they will win. They fight because some things are worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. Council Speaker Velnara leaned back in her chair. Officer Zethik, what are you recommending? I recommend that we stop treating human tactical doctrine as reckless deviation from established protocols. I recommend that we start treating it as advanced understanding of principles we are only beginning to comprehend. The human delegation looked uncomfortable with the praise, which was itself perfectly human. They genuinely didn't understand why anyone would consider their actions remarkable. Furthermore, I continued, I recommend that all coalition officers spend rotation time serving aboard human-commanded vessels. Not to learn human tactics, but to learn human values, to understand what it means to hold the line. I closed my presentation with a personal observation that I hoped would carry weight with the diverse species represented in the chamber. 3 months ago, I was a Vorthak officer who believed in the supremacy of logic and the importance of survival above all else. Today, I am a coalition officer who understands that some things matter more than survival. This transformation occurred because I served alongside humans who were willing to die for people they had never met. I paused, then added, and because when the moment came to choose between safety and duty, those humans made it impossible for me to choose safety. Captain Morrison stood up from the human delegation. Counselor Velnara, if I may respond? Of course, Captain. Morrison moved to the center of the chamber with the easy confidence that characterized human leaders. Officer Zethik makes our actions sound more noble than they were. The truth is simpler. We saw people in danger. We had the ability to help, so we helped. That's not philosophy. That's just basic decency. A ripple of what could only be called fond exasperation went through the chamber. Even when being honored for extraordinary courage, humans insisted on treating their actions as ordinary. But, Morrison continued, if Officer Zethik's report helps the Coalition understand something important about cooperation and mutual defense, then I'm glad he wrote it, because the real lesson from Kepler Station isn't about human courage. It's about what happens when different species work together toward common goals. She gestured to include our entire mixed species crew. Every person on my ship made the choice to stay and fight. Zethik could have recommended retreat and been completely justified. Chief Engineer Gralix could have declared the mission too dangerous for his honor code. Pilot Krex could have refused to execute impossible maneuvers. Morrison's voice grew stronger as she continued. But they didn't. They chose to stand with us because they understood something that transcends species differences. When innocent lives are at stake, the only acceptable response is to do everything in your power to protect them. Council Speaker Velnara nodded slowly. Captain Morrison, the Coalition owes you and your crew a debt that cannot be easily repaid. Counselor, Morrison replied, the only payment we want is the assurance that next time civilians are in danger, someone else will be crazy enough to help them. The chamber erupted in what I had learned to recognize as applause, though it sounded different across 47 species. Tentacles slapped against surfaces, vocal sacs inflated and deflated rapidly. Crystalline beings chimed in harmonic frequencies. As the ceremony concluded and delegations began to disperse, I found myself approached by officers from dozens of different species. They all wanted to know the same thing. What was it really like to serve with humans in combat? The answer was different for each of them, but the core remained the same. Humans made you want to be better than you thought you could be. They made impossible things seem merely difficult, and difficult things seem like opportunities to prove yourself worthy of their trust. But more than that, they made you understand that courage was not an innate quality that some species possessed and others lacked. Courage was a choice, available to anyone willing to prioritize principle over safety. 6 months later, I was promoted to Senior Communications Officer and assigned to a new ship with a mixed species crew. When we received our first distress call from a civilian transport under attack by pirates, I found myself suggesting a direct assault approach that would have horrified my former logical mindset. My captain, a Centaurian named Veltar, looked at me with surprise. Officer Zethik, that approach carries significant risk to our vessel and crew. Yes, sir, I agreed. But there are 87 families on that transport who can't wait for backup to arrive. Veltar studied the tactical display for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. Helm. Set intercept course. Maximum speed. As we accelerated toward another impossible fight, I realized that Captain Morrison and her crew had given me something far more valuable than understanding of human tactics. They had given me the ability to recognize when the right choice was also the dangerous choice, and the courage to make that choice anyway. I still felt fear. The difference was that now I understood fear as information, rather than instruction. It told me that something important was at stake. Not that I should avoid taking action, The pirates scattered when they realized a coalition vessel was willing to engage them directly over civilian lives. Another group of innocents went home safely because someone had chosen to hold the line. Later, when my crew asked me where I had learned such aggressive tactics, I told them the truth. I had learned from humans that the most important battles are the ones you fight, not because you can win, but because you cannot afford to lose. I had learned that holding the line was not just a human concept. It was a coalition ideal that humans had simply been brave enough to define first. And I had learned that courage, once witnessed, becomes impossible to forget and increasingly difficult to ignore. The galaxy was a safer place because humans existed in it. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they had taught the rest of us that strength and intelligence meant nothing without the will to use them in defense of those who could not defend themselves. That was the real lesson from Kepler Station, and the reason I would spend the rest of my career trying to live up to the example set by one human captain who had refused to accept that innocent people deserved to die simply because saving them was dangerous. Fear and hope, I had learned, were not opposites. They were partners in the creation of courage. And courage, once discovered, changed everything.